The night hides secrets, secrets not everyone wants to know. But you stayed, listening, searching for something that should never be found. But be careful, because once you start hearing this story, something might start hearing you too. Welcome to Dunya Dalam Sirida, where fear is your closest friend. My name is Ethan Clark. I'm a freelance journalist, and I specialize in investigating strange and unsettling cases, anything from unsolved murders to eerie sightings in remote villages. But of all the stories I've pursued, none compare to what happened to me at Blackwood Asylum. It all started when I received an old letter. No sender, just my address written in black ink. The paper was yellowed, as if it had been sitting somewhere for decades before finally making its way to me. The letter contained only one sentence. You must come to Blackwood Asylum before it's too late. I had never heard of the place before. But after some research, I found out that Blackwood was an old mental asylum deep in the English countryside. It had been shut down over 50 years ago. People said its patients had mysteriously disappeared, one by one, before the asylum was finally abandoned. Some believed it was haunted. I wasn't one to believe in ghost stories, but I had a bad habit. The stranger the mystery, the more I wanted to solve it. And that's how I ended up standing in front of Blackwood Asylum's rusted iron gate, unaware that I was about to step into a nightmare I would never escape from. The asylum's gate stood tall, its iron bars covered in rust. I pushed it open, and the creaking of old metal echoed through the silence of the late afternoon. Something about the air felt different. It was colder inside the gate, as if the place itself rejected my presence. The building loomed over me, its large windows dark and hollow. It felt like dozens of invisible eyes were watching from inside. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. Inside, the scent of dust and decay filled my lungs. The marble floor, which must have once been grand, was now cracked and covered in moss. I switched on my flashlight and walked further in. Lining the walls were old paintings of doctors and patients who had once stayed here. Most of the portraits were faded with time. But one painting stood out, a portrait of a man in a doctor's coat, his sharp eyes staring straight ahead as if piercing through anyone who dared look at him. The name beneath it read, Dr. Aldridge. I had come across his name in my research. He was the head doctor before the asylum was shut down. But something unsettled me even more. On the frame's edge, there were fresh fingerprints. Someone had touched this recently. I felt like the room was still alive. I continued down the long hallway, my footsteps echoing against the peeling white walls. But then I stopped. On the dusty floor in front of me, there were footprints. Wet footprints. As if someone had just walked through here moments before me. I swallowed hard. There shouldn't be anyone else here, right? I aimed my flashlight further down the hall, following the trail of prints. They led me to a door with a faded sign, Special Care Unit. I reached for the doorknob. The cold metal sent a shiver up my spine. I gave it a push. Locked. I stepped back, my instincts telling me that something was very, very wrong. Then I heard it. A knock. Soft. Rhythmic. As if someone inside the room knew I was there. My heartbeat pounded in my chest. I tried to convince myself that it was just the building settling, maybe wood shifting with age. But as I turned away, something made my blood turn cold. At the end of the hallway, where there had been nothing before, a figure was now standing. Too far to make out its face, but its silhouette was unmistakable. It was just standing there. I tried to say something, but my voice caught in my throat. Slowly, I took a step back, keeping my eyes locked on the figure. It didn't move. I swallowed and turned toward the entrance, ready to leave. But when I glanced back again, the figure was closer. It had moved without making a sound. I nearly ran back toward the main hall, but something on the floor caught my attention. A black and white photograph. With shaky hands, I picked it up. The photo showed a group of Blackwood Asylum patients sitting in rows, their faces blank. They were dressed in tattered hospital gowns. But there was one thing that made my stomach drop. Right in the middle of the group sat someone I knew. Me. Wearing the same clothes I had on right now. That wasn't possible. This had to be some kind of trick, right? My breath came in sharp gasps. I lifted my head, and at that moment, I realized something even worse. There was someone standing behind me. Before I could react, I heard a whisper in my ear. "You finally came back." The whisper sent a shiver down my spine. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my body was frozen in place. Slowly, I turned around. No one was there. But something was wrong, very wrong. The air behind me was colder, thick like the weight of something unseen pressing down on my chest. I forced myself to breathe, gripping the photograph tightly in my hand. The image of me sitting among Blackwood's long-lost patients burned into my mind. There had to be an explanation for this. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't. Then, a loud bang echoed through the asylum. It came from behind the locked special care unit door. I stumbled backward, my flashlight flickering. The knock earlier had been soft, almost hesitant. But this was different. It was angry. Like something wanted out. I turned and ran. I didn't care anymore, I needed to get out. But as I retraced my steps, the hallway stretched endlessly ahead of me. That wasn't possible. I had just come this way. The paintings, the old furniture, even the cracks in the walls, they all looked the same, repeating over and over as if I was running in circles. No matter how fast I moved, I never seemed to get closer to the main entrance. I stopped, my breath ragged. My surroundings were shifting, twisting. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The paintings on the walls had changed. They no longer showed doctors and patients. They showed me. In different positions. Running. Looking over my shoulder. Staring in terror. And in every single one, something was always behind me. Panic clawed at my throat. I needed to think. I forced myself to slow down, to focus. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe the air in this place was messing with my head. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a door I hadn't noticed before. It was slightly ajar, a dim light spilling from within. A whisper drifted through the air. "Ethan." My name. I should have run the other way. Every instinct told me not to go in. But I stepped inside. The room was small, filled with dust-covered furniture. Papers were scattered across a desk, yellowed with age. And then I saw it. A patient file. With my name on it. My fingers trembled as I opened the file. The paper felt old, fragile, like it would disintegrate if I wasn't careful. Patient name, Ethan Clark. Date of admission, July 5, 1952. Diagnosis, severe dissociative amnesia, delusions, paranoia. I shook my head. No. No, this was wrong. I wasn't even born in 1952. I flipped through the pages. Each one documented treatments, therapy sessions, notes from Dr. Aldridge himself. Patient shows extreme resistance to remembering his past. When confronted with images of his time here, he becomes agitated, violent. Progress is slow. He still believes he is someone else, a journalist from the future. My heart pounded. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Then, on the last page, a final entry. Patient has finally accepted his reality. Treatment successful. Subject will remain in Blackwood Asylum indefinitely. The date of the entry? Tomorrow. I backed away from the desk, my mind reeling. This was a sick joke. Someone was messing with me. Then I saw the mirror. A tall, cracked mirror stood in the corner of the room. I stepped closer. My reflection was wrong. It moved a second too late. It smiled when I didn't. And then it spoke. "Time to go back, Ethan." A cold hand grabbed my shoulder from behind. The world went dark. I woke up gasping for air, my body drenched in cold sweat. The room around me was different. Gone were the dust-covered furniture and scattered papers. Instead, I was lying on a creaky metal-framed bed, the kind you'd see in an old hospital. The walls were stark white, too clean, too sterile except for the scratches. Deep, jagged scratch marks lined the walls, as if someone had spent years clawing at them, trying to escape. And then I saw it. A name tag bolted to the door. Patient, Ethan Clark. Status, permanent resident. My pulse pounded in my ears. No. No, no, no. This wasn't right. I had come here to investigate the asylum. I wasn't a patient. I swung my legs off the bed, my breath quickening. My head throbbed, my vision blurred at the edges. I needed to get out. But then, something shifted behind me. A voice dry, raspy, barely more than a whisper. You should have never come back. I turned so fast that I nearly lost my balance. In the farthest corner of the room, someone or something was crouched in the darkness. Its back was hunched, limbs twisted unnaturally. The shadows clung to its body like smoke, making it hard to tell where the darkness ended and it began. But the worst part? It was wearing the same hospital gown as me. I took a step back, my hands fumbling for the door handle. Locked. Of course. The figure moved, its bones cracking like dry wood as it slowly lifted its head. And then I saw its face. It was me. I stumbled backward, my heart slamming against my ribs. No. This was a nightmare. It had to be. But the thing in the corner, the other me, began crawling forward, its fingers scraping against the tiled floor. They won't let you leave, it whispered, its voice layered, as if multiple voices were speaking at once. You're one of us now. The walls around me shifted. The door was gone. The bed was gone. The room itself was changing. It was swallowing me. The scratches on the walls deepened, the white tiles blackening like burnt flesh. The air grew thick with the stench of decay. And then, the thing that looked like me smiled. You forgot, didn't you? The room collapsed into darkness. I was no longer in the asylum. I was somewhere else. Someone else. Flashes of memories I didn't remember living rushed through my mind. The sound of screaming patients. The cold grip of leather restraints. The face of Dr. Aldridge, staring down at me. You need to forget, Ethan. That's the only way you'll survive. And then, the worst memory of all. I saw myself. Not as a journalist. Not as an outsider. But as a patient. Strapped to a hospital bed, screaming, pleading, while the doctors injected something into my veins. I had been here before. I hadn't come to investigate Blackwood. I had escaped it. And now, it had dragged me back. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the hallway. The same endless hallway as before. But now, it was full. Rows and rows of patients, all wearing the same hospital gowns, all standing still, staring at me. Some had hollow eye sockets. Some had mouths sewn shut. Some had no faces at all. And then, one by one, they turned to look at me. I wasn't an outsider anymore. I was one of them. And this time, Blackwood Asylum wouldn't let me go. The hallway was silent. Not the kind of silence that brings peace, but the kind that listens. The patients stood frozen, their hollow eyes locked onto me. My pulse pounded so loud I swore they could hear it. Then, the whispers started. Not from them. From the walls. The cracked, rotting walls of the asylum breathed, murmuring secrets in a language I didn't understand. Words slithered through the air, scratching at my ears, filling my mind with something ancient. You don't belong here. You never did. But you will. The patients began to move. Not walking, gliding toward me, their heads tilting unnaturally, their mouths hanging open in silent screams. I took a step back, but the floor felt sticky, as if something beneath it was trying to pull me under. And then I heard it. A slow, rhythmic sound. Tap. 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 Someone or something was approaching. The patients froze. Every single one of them turned their heads toward the darkness at the end of the hall. Their bodies trembled as if they feared what was coming. And then, out of the shadows, he stepped forward. Dr. Aldridge. But he was wrong. His white coat was stained dark with something thick and black, his hands unnaturally long, fingers curling like claws. His face was the worst part stretched, his mouth too wide, his eyes bottomless pits of ink. "Ethan," he said, his voice smooth but wrong. "You've been very, very sick." I stumbled backward. "You don't remember, do you?" he whispered, stepping closer. "What we did to you?" Something inside me screamed to run. But my body wouldn't move. Because deep down, a horrible thought clawed its way into my mind. What if he wasn't lying? What if I really had been here before? The asylum shifted around me. The hallway melted away, walls twisting and groaning like living things, reforming into something worse. A treatment room. Rusty surgical tools lined the walls. Leather straps dangled from an old, stained operating table. A single, flickering light swung from the ceiling, casting jagged shadows across the room. "You've forgotten so much, Ethan," Aldridge crooned. "Let me help you remember." A machine hummed to life in the corner, wires buzzing, electrodes sparking. I knew what it was. Electroshock therapy. Aldridge stepped closer, rolling up his sleeves. His arms were covered in burn marks, as if he had used this machine on himself. "This will only hurt for a moment." Then, without warning, the patients from the hallway swarmed into the room. Not to stop him. To hold me down. I thrashed, kicked, tried to scream, but they were too strong. They forced me onto the cold metal table, leather straps snapping around my wrists and ankles. The scent of burnt flesh filled my nose. Aldridge placed the electrodes against my temples, his black, hollow eyes watching me. "Do you remember now?" he whispered. And then, ah! Pain like nothing I'd ever known ripped through my skull. I saw flashes. Blood. Screaming. My own hands, covered in something dark. A door that I was never supposed to open. And then, her. A woman. A patient. Her face was blurred, but I knew her. I knew her. And the last thing I saw before everything snapped back to black was her lips moving. But no sound came out. I woke up alone. The straps were gone. The room was gone. I was back in the hallway. But this time, the walls had changed. The scratches were no longer random. They were words. And I could finally read them. "You did this. You killed her. You let her die." The whispers were back, louder, sharper, hissing in my ears. "Remember, Ethan. Remember what you did." I turned. And there she was. The woman from my vision. Standing at the end of the hall. Her face still blurred, but now. Her eyes were wide open. And she was coming for me. I couldn't breathe. She was standing there at the end of the hallway, staring at me with those wide, hollow eyes. The woman from my vision. Her presence made the air feel thicker, as if the walls were closing in around me. The lights above flickered violently, casting jagged shadows across her form. And then, she moved. Not like a person. Like a glitch in reality, one moment still, the next closer. I stumbled back, my hands scrambling against the cold walls. My heart slammed against my ribs. She didn't walk. She didn't run. She just appeared closer and closer, every time the lights blinked. And the worst part? She wasn't making a sound. Not a single footstep. Not even the rustling of clothes. Just the overwhelming, suffocating silence. And then, the lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed me. I spun around, my breath ragged, my ears straining for the slightest sound. Nothing. Then a whisper. "You let me die." The voice was so close, right behind me. I bolted. I ran blindly through the darkness, my hands outstretched, searching for something, anything to ground me. My feet pounded against the floor, but it felt like I was running in place, the hallway stretching endlessly. And then, just as suddenly as it had disappeared, the light returned. But I was no longer in the hallway. I was inside a room. A patient's room. And the door behind me was gone. The room smelled like rotting flowers. The kind left at grave sites for too long. A single bed sat against the wall, covered in yellowed sheets. The air felt too heavy, like something was watching me. Then I saw it. The nameplate on the wall. Patient, Margaret Holloway. Status, deceased. I stepped back, my pulse roaring in my ears. And then, the bed sheets shifted. Something underneath them moved. My stomach twisted as the sheet slowly peeled away, revealing a body thin, fragile looking, covered in deep bruises. Margaret Holloway. Her chest rose. She wasn't dead. Not yet. Her lips parted, dry and cracked, as she whispered something so faint I barely heard it. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I froze. You weren't supposed to leave me. Her hand shot out, gripping my wrist with ice-cold fingers. And suddenly, I remembered. A memory slammed into me like a wrecking ball. Margaret Holloway. I knew her. She wasn't just some random patient. She was my friend. No more than that. She was the reason I had been in Blackwood Asylum in the first place. We had made a promise to escape together. But something had gone wrong. I had left her behind. And now, she had come back for me. The room began to rot. The walls blackened, paint peeling like dead skin. The bed sank into the floor, dragging Margaret down with it. But she never let go of my wrist. Her grip tightened bone-crushingly tight as she whispered one final sentence. "You need to see where they put me." The floor beneath me gave way. And I fell. I was falling. Faster and faster, the world around me twisting into a black abyss. The air was thick and putrid, filling my lungs with the scent of decay. I tried to scream, but no sound came out, only the echo of Margaret's final words. "You need to see where they put me." And then, I hit the ground. The impact sent a sharp pain through my back, knocking the breath out of me. I gasped, blinking against the suffocating darkness. It was cold. The kind of cold that seeped into your bones, making you feel like you'd been buried alive. A single dim light bulb flickered above me, casting a weak, sickly glow on my surroundings. And that's when I saw them. The graves. Rows upon rows of shallow, unmarked graves, stretching into the shadows. And one of them was open. The sight of it sent a chill up my spine. An open coffin, half buried in the dirt, the wood rotting, its lid splintered as if someone had tried to claw their way out. I didn't want to look inside. I needed to look inside. Slowly, I stepped forward, my breath shaking. My fingers trembled as I reached for the edge of the coffin and pulled. The lid creaked open. And inside, Margaret. Her body was twisted unnaturally, her arms bent at impossible angles, her eyes open, staring blankly at the ceiling. Her mouth hung open in a frozen scream, and deep, bloody scratch marks lined the inside of the coffin. She had been buried alive. And I had left her here. The whispers started again. Low, distorted, echoing from all around me. "We never left. They put us here. They buried us, but we remember." I turned slowly. The other graves were moving. Dirt shifted. Wood creaked. Thin, skeletal fingers clawed out from beneath the earth, dragging themselves up. Dozens of figures began to rise, their hollow, empty faces turned toward me. I stepped back, my pulse hammering. It wasn't just Margaret, I realized. It was all of them. The asylum hadn't just housed the mentally ill. It had buried them. The dead were waking up. One by one, they crawled from their graves, their bodies twisted and broken, their mouths opening and closing as if trying to speak, but no words came out, only the sound of their bones cracking as they moved. And then they turned toward me, as if they had been waiting. Something inside me snapped. I ran. My feet pounded against the dirt, the flickering light above me casting monstrous shadows along the walls. The air was thick with dust and the stench of death. Behind me, I could hear the sound of scraping, the shuffle of bodies dragging themselves closer. I didn't dare look back. I had to get out. But then I saw it. A door. Heavy, rusted, bolted shut. But it was real. A way out. I lunged for it, fingers scrambling at the rusted handle. And just as I pulled it open, something grabbed my ankle. The grip was ice cold. I looked down, my breath catching in my throat. A hand. Pale, bony, its fingers wrapped around my ankle with inhuman strength. Its nails were long and jagged, caked with old blood. And then, with a slow, agonizing motion, it pulled. I hit the ground hard, dirt filling my mouth, my hands clawing at the floor as I tried to hold on. I kicked, struggled, but the grip only tightened. The whispers turned into a chorus of screams, overlapping, echoing, crying out from the darkness. Stay. Join us. You belong here. A face emerged from the ground. Half decayed. Eyes black holes of nothingness. Its mouth stretched open far too wide, and from its throat came a voice that wasn't human. Ethan. It knew my name. And then the floor collapsed beneath me. And I fell. Again.